Welcome back to today's show. I'll be your host, Sniffy Slurper. And boy, let me tell you that we have a great show planned for you. Packed full with surprises. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. Let's get back to the video. It took the police 7 minutes to arrive. I counted. Starbursts of blue and red lights scattered over the dense greenery as I sat next to my dad and tried not to look at my mom. My dad kept passing in and out of consciousness, mostly because the pain in his arm would wake him up and the ensuing shock would put him back to sleep. At this point, little fazed me. I tightened the sheets around his arm when he was passed out and ignored the snap of several bones shifting about. When the police crashed through our front door and pounded up the stairs, I greeted them with the same blank stare. Wilkes and Dempsey were there, and I half-heartedly searched for the gun. This was their fault, and they promised me we'd be protected, that there would be a squad car out front, but that didn't matter now. Instead, I allowed myself to be whisked out of the house and down to an ambulance parked in the North Street. A paramedic placed a blanket around my shoulders even though I wasn't cold and checked my body for any signs of damage. My father was carried out in a stretcher next to me. 2 paramedics managed him while Wilkes followed closely behind, grimacing. They left my mom where she was, for forensics, I guess. I could still see her limp on the floor of her bedroom, skull cracked ever so slightly, her eyes empty. I'm not sure when exhaustion overcame me, but the last thing I remember was watching the lights flicker off the bottoms of the trees above me, and then nothing. The next morning I awoke in a neat room filled with plastic chairs, plush toys, kiddie books, and an old TV. I felt something hard shift in my right pocket and brought out the hunting knife Wilkes had given me. I opened the blade and stared at the polished steel, trying to come to terms with what happened that night before. Brief flashes of the nightmarish scene played out in my mind, shifting to the next in a blur of rotting green colors. The memories were vivid. My dog smashing apart against the window, screams of my parents, my dad being thrown and my mom being slammed into the floor. I would never rid myself of that horrendous sound, that small, ear-grinding crack before her eyes rolled back and she went limp. The blade reflected my ashen features, showing the blood drained from my face. Kids were not built for this caliber of loss. A dog could be grieved for with time, a mother over a longer period, but when a monstrosity ripped all of that away simply for a childish indulgence, it made your very existence questionable. The only reason I looked up when I saw Wilkes' form slip into the room and the blade was because of my dad. I still had him. I prayed to God that the monster hadn't sliced his arteries. As I looked up, I caught a glint of guilt in Wilkes' eyes and remembered the final peculiarity of the night before. No patrol car. I folded the knife closed as Wilkes took a seat opposite of me. "Where was the car?" I asked. "You promised me protection." "Yes, about that." Wilkes stroked his mustache furiously. "Aiden, what happened to your parents was tragic. The brutality of the home invasion can wreak havoc on a child's mind." "Home invasion?" I couldn't help but laugh thinly, imagining the gruesome visage of that atrocity breaking in. "A monster attacked us. It broke through our window. It killed my dog." Wilkes was fidgeting again, sweating. He took out his notepad and read over something. "Yes, that's what you told us last night. But you were also catatonic, son. We're having forensics look over the scene now, and, well, the front door was tampered with, and there was dirt on the stairs. I recalled the scratching. Someone broke in. Someone who probably stalked out your home." I felt my throat close up. They didn't believe me, or refused to believe me. The patrol car, why wasn't there one? We couldn't spare the manpower. Hot tears began to blur my vision. I shuddered, feeling my accusatory facade weaken. You promised. My mom. She's gone, and my dad. You could have stopped it. Wilkes broke. No one can stop it, he almost shouted. You think anyone wants to play with it? Anyone can stand against it? I stared at him, stunned. He knew. He must have seen it, encountered it somewhere. Then I remember the day he'd gone to look for Dyson down the ravine. He announced he had come back, finding nothing. Obviously, they knew way more than they let on. I took out the knife, a small, insignificant token from Wilkes, and dug the blade into a table between us. I stood against it, I muttered. Wilkes just stared back, watching his reflection on the blade. I shot it with a .401 revolver, blew holes in its ugly face. I looked up at Wilkes, suddenly feeling much older than my 11 years. So what now? Wilkes seemed to sag under my gaze. We're gonna put you in a motel for a couple weeks with an officer. Not you, I hope. He winced at that, but continued. You'll stay there until your father is capable of taking care of you again. I felt guilt squeeze my chest. I'd forgotten about his injury. How is my dad? Stable. Wilkes looked relieved to deliver some less brutal news. He received 42 stitches and a liter of blood, but the damage was repairable to a certain degree. We're not sure if he'll be able to fully use his arm again, but he'll certainly live. I nodded, feeling the pressure on my chest lessen. When will he wake up? 3 to 4 days. And in the meantime, I'm just gonna hold up in a hotel? Wilkes nodded. Everything passed in a blur after that. The officer assigned me was someone new to the force, but friendly and comforting. I spent a lot of time watching TV and reading Goosebumps, a way to diffuse my situation, I guess. Campy horror to dilute true horror, whatever worked. They made a mistake with my mother's body, cremated her in some bizarre mix-up after analyzing her for evidence. Concussive force to the head caused by a blunt object was the official cause of death. The news of her cremation hit me hard. I'd been hoping to say goodbye in a way my parents often talked about. Open casket, condolences, comfort, and peace. As difficult as those couple days were for me, though, my dad had it worse. He spent 4 days getting his hands stitched, probed, bound back together. It had been a messy injury, and the creature's claws hooking the muscle on his left arm, sliding it almost entirely free from the bone. And when he finally came around, sentient enough to recall the horror, he encountered precisely what I had from the day Dyson died. Disbelief and pity. No one believed him. They brought up shock, meds, pain, tragedy, loss, adrenaline, love, and pretty much every other logical diagnosis to filter his ravings of a tree monster attacking him and his wife. He only went quiet when the somber details of her cremation were reported. When he knocked on my hotel door, he looked worn out, both mentally and physically, but he still remained strong enough to take my running hug in stride. Holding me close as he laughed in a mixture of pain and relief. Only when we sat down together and the officer who'd been staying with me left to get groceries did he finally break. I sat by, crying out my own grief, while my father, reduced to a near infantile state, absorbed the helplessness of his situation. He was never one for tears, but he sobbed in that apartment. Fractures of the monster, of his arm, and most of all of his wife, my mother, broke free. I found myself at a bizarre crossroad as I comforted him in mutual loss. We'd switched places through the brutal tragedy, all because some cretin wanted to play with us, a cretin powerful enough to intimidate law enforcement. I had to remind myself, no one would ever believe my dad wry about this, and between the two of us, I feared I might be the only one who'd be able to move on. More time passed. The investigation conducted on our home took a week due to the law checking up on the surrounding environment. I wondered if the creature would make another appearance, eager to play, or if the otherwise intimidate. In neither case, I shuddered to think about the ungodly ravine. It was too deep to be natural. It contained such evil. By the time the investigation wrapped up a week and a half after the initial incident, my dad seemed to be making a recovery. His hand, though, far off from recovery, seemed to be giving him less pain, and we'd be able to spread my mother's ashes in a nearby river. When Wilkes came to us the day after telling us we could move back into the house, I almost laughed. My dad held me back. "We need to get our stuff out of there," he explained to me. "Your mother's belongings, yours, mine, all of it. We'll move far away." I swore. He glanced at Wilkes when he said that, but the officer only looked away guiltily. "One night," he promised. Fighting back a shudder, I nodded. "One night, and then we go." Some part of me knew this was lunacy, but my dad seemed as though he might benefit from closure. To take a piece of Mom away from that house himself, as though he could rescue her. We went that afternoon, and with Dempsey and the officer who'd looked after me. I'd insisted Wilkes not come. He hadn't protested. The officer helped us shift some smaller items into a U-Haul. When asked what to do about the larger beds, couches, furniture, my dad told them to get rid of it. That night, I slept with my dad in his room. The officer was down the hall in the guest room. We pretended Mom was there too, and that we'd grudgingly allowed Dyson to climb up as well. It felt hollow to me, but Dad seemed to find it therapeutic, as if some sense of normalcy had returned. Sleep came quickly for him, but slowly for me. I stayed up a little longer, watching shadows dance along the ceiling. I'm not sure which woke me, the scratching or the drafts of air. Either way, I knew something was wrong. I was alone for one thing. The covers where my dad had been flipped up. More scratching came from the door, so eerily similar to Dyson trying to get in. It didn't fool me for a second. I dug into my PJ bottoms and took out the knife. Having the small weapon in hand offered some measure of comfort. Scratching continued, burrowing into my mind. I stalked over and yanked the door open to find nothing. Just as I suspected. And then I felt a pull from the hall, sucking at my PJs and swirling towards the staircase. Cautiously, I moved down the hallway and stopped at the guest room first. No one there. My heart thudded and my grip tightened on the knife as I slipped towards the staircase and began to descend. The air continued to pull me along like a great inhalation. At the end of it, I found my dad sitting at our kitchen table, unmoving. I slowly crept around him, brandishing the knife for any sign of danger. There were none to be had. "Dad?" I whispered. "Are you all right?" My father turned to me and smiled, sad and pained. "I'm not sure, Aiden. Thought I was for a while, but I don't know anymore." I stepped up to the counter and jolted when I saw why he remained so still. His arm lay palms up on the granite surface, one of a patchwork of purple and yellow, the other slightly red from where he'd spilled coffee on it, and in between lay a .410 revolver. My mind reeled from its appearance. The police would have locked it up as a piece of evidence, but then someone like Wilkes could have just as well easily moved it. "Dad?" "Don't worry." My dad rotated his arms softly in the light. The fresh stitches in his left glinted back, his skin appearing translucent. "I'm finally at peace. I know what I am now. For your mother. For you. These are perfect metaphors." He wiggled his right hand, but his left remained limp. "Completely fucking useless." I winced at the curse. "Dad? Please. You're not." I need you, okay? We can get through this. My father shook his head sadly. No one believes us. No one will ever avenge your mother. He was crying again, a faint smile gracing his lips as he looked to me. His right fingers wrapped the revolver, and suddenly the barrel was under his chin. Go play, Aiden. Go play. I jolted. My father's face ruptured into a miasma of gore. He flopped against the table. I gaped at him, hearing the shrill wheezes of his shattered jaws struggling to suck in one more breath. Go. Play. Tears prickled my eyes as I marched past him, past the refrigerator where the hole in the wall still resided, through the garage, across the driveway to the edge of the ravine. An emerald crevice yawned before me, and suddenly his face loomed out of the night. Ugly, patchy as ever, with pus dripping from open orifices and scabby leaves peeling from his misshapen head. He hovered over me with a rotting grin.
Play,
he asked. I nodded, the knife trembling in my grasp as I stepped into the void. Yes, I croaked hoarsely, slipping down the slope towards the sewer. We'll play.